All right, y'all, what's good? It's your boy Family Man here for my first YouTube video. I'm entitling this "What's Up, Fam." It's an opportunity for you to get to know me as a poet, as a person, as a human being. You got some help here with me today because this YouTube stuff I can't do. So I got my helper, my goddaughter, Shy Breezy in the building, right? And so we're gonna keep going, right? So I posted, asked you guys to ask me some questions. Altogether, I got 9 questions, which is cool. Some of them are about life, and then some of them are about poetry. And so what I was thinking was that I'll switch it up. So it's the Family Man poetry page. So I'll start with a poetry question. Then we'll go to a life question, and then we'll go back and forth, back, forth, and forth. Right, Aaliyah, you're missed. So let's get into the first question. First question is came to me by my girl Jen, sipping on some gin. Who/what introduced you to poetry? So first, I love music. I always love music, whether it's gospel, old school Motown stuff. But I would say back in 2006, I might have, I not I might have. In 2006, I dislocated my knee, and I was home for a month. And while I was home, I would watch TV, I would draw, but where I would draw was in my sister's room, and I would turn on the TV sometimes, and then I saw on her TV she had episodes of a show called Russell Simmons Presents Def Poetry Jam, and so she had a whole season of it. And so I'm talking about like poets like Shehan the poet, Kanye West did a poem on there, Common was on there. And so it introduced me into like spoken word poetry. I don't really care. I respect like the old school like sonnets and all that, but I love spoken word poetry. I would just watch those, and it kind of hooked me, and I loved like the storytelling of it. And so like that introduced me to it. So then I just started YouTubing things. I found out about Urban Word, but I was too old for Urban Word, so all I used to do was watch the videos. And I went to the slam that was at the Apollo when they did the New York Knicks Poetry Slam. I attended that back in the day, and so that's pretty much what it was. From that, like my favorite poets, Rudy Francisco, Carvin Sassant, Alicia Harris. They used to have a group called Strivers Row. It was all around New York, and any show they was at. Joshua Bennett. Oh my God! So one time, Joshua Bennett and Rudy Francisco did a show called The Gentleman and the Scholar in the city. Yeah, crazy. I was able to get Rudy Francisco's autograph that day. If you don't know him, look him up. He's dope. He actually has a new book of poetry coming out later this year. All right. One of my old students, Kiara, asked the question, why is love so hard? For me, and I'm going to speak for me, love is not hard. I was grateful to grow up in a family, like, we show love in different ways. Like, my sister, she's not a mushy person. I'm very mushy. You speak to my wife, hey babe, she'll tell you that I'm very mushy. But my sister, she'll show love through action. But when it comes down to like the difficulties of loving or receiving love, it's like when we've been hurt and we try to love again, whether it's hurt in a romantic relationship or hurt by a business partner or hurt by a friend, it's like it's hard to move on from that hurt and deal with that hurt. And so as a teacher, as a big brother, sometimes like when you're dealing with like that heartbreak or that disappointment, I kind of like advise a person to like heal from that hurt before trying again, because it takes courage to love again, right? So we try and then we get disappointed. We get disappointed because the relationship didn't work out, the business plan didn't work out, and then it's like, dang, now I gotta start all over again. Um, but for me, it's worth it. That the next person or the next opportunity has nothing to do with the last, right? And so, for me, love isn't necessarily hard. Um, I know that people have to earn your love and your trust. That's not something that you should give up easily, but like, and when it's reciprocated, it's easier to love as well, because you're pouring out and then that person is pouring back. You're pouring out and then that person is pouring You're back. Pouring out and then that person is pouring back into you. So you want to make sure that you're loving somebody that's loving you back, so you don't end up with an empty cup, right? Bars. All right, homie Sid Australia. She said, "What's your favorite poem of yours?" So I have this poem called "Bruises and Scars," and it talks about how it goes. It talks about how like a bruise is something that's current, right? And so you bang your head or you bang your knee, or something slams on your hand, you'll have a bruise forever. Not forever, until it heals, right? And so even after the day after the bruise happened, you could kind of look at the bruise and still remember it, right? And scars is a denotation of like a wound that has been healed. But sometimes what happens is, like, even when we look at that scar, we replay what happens. And so within that poem, I talk about that. I talk about the scars and bruises of life. It's one of my favorite poems because I felt like it was an honest poem. It was a poem like I'm a silver lining kind of guy. I try to see the best in everything. And so being able to tap in and talk about some things that were painful, or like even in the poem, in my head, I know I'm referencing certain people that have gone through things. So that's one of my favorite poems, just because it's different from what I normally write. So Bruises and Scars, and who knows, maybe I'll share a piece of it at the end of this. My boy Dion writes, what's good, Dion? Up in Syracuse, first year freshman. He asked me what inspired me to start Man Cave. And so for those who don't know, I'm an 11th and 12th grade English teacher at this Institute for Health Professions at Cambria Heights, aka Health, aka the best school in the world, aka at us, and we'll tell you some more. So I've been teaching there, and we run a group called Man Cave on lunch. During lunch periods, we all come in together every Wednesday or one day a week, depending on the school year, and we talk. It's a safe space for the guys to come in. We talk sports, we talk life, we talk relationships, career. But in order to tell you how that started, I have to rewind back to my personal life. And I'm a youth leader at my church, the Refuge Church of Christ, 1837 Mott Avenue. Come see us there too, or catch us on Zoom, because we're all streaming now, right? But some years, a long time ago, I want to say like I was working at Kings County Hospital at the time, 05, 06, something like that. And I was riding the bus, and I would see these two brothers, the older brother and the younger brother. And the older brother would always be like putting his brother down. Like, you so stupid, why you acting up? He would be beating his brother up. And it was hard for me to see that because anybody that knows me, like, I'm a family person. Um, I don't have any natural little brothers, but I have a lot of little brothers. Um, my mother always tell me, like, Phil, you always hugging on people, make sure you always got on deodorant and stuff, right? Because I love people. And so I saw these two young men and the way the older brother was treating them, and I was led to say something to him. I was like, listen, when you guys are outside, you guys need to be moving as a unit, right? If the older brother, if a stranger sees the older brother hitting on the younger brother, it gives him more reason to pick on the younger brother, right? And so I was trying to encourage him and tell him, like, listen, you need to y'all need to move as a unit. And gratefully and thankfully, he was receptive to that feedback. And so again, I would see the two brothers on the bus, and then it kind of like that interaction kind of had made me think more about the young people around me. And in my church, I started a program called the Salt Project. This is a picture. I'm gonna zoom in and zoom back out. Coming from the scripture, Matthew 5:13, ye are the salt of the earth, but if the salt has lost its savor, what good is it? And so within that program, every 2 Saturdays, like so on the second and the fourth Saturday, we would come downstairs, get some pizza. We would have games, and so we would talk. We would have either Bible scripture that we would read and talk about it, or at one point we was reading Tony Dungy's book, Quiet Strength. Then we also did things like bowling events. We went to a couple basketball games. And so when I got hired when I interviewed for my job at Health, I mentioned that I was a mentor and that I had this program that I did at my church that was very successful. And so then, like, once I got the job and I started in October 2016, my principal and shout out to Mr. Rob, and my vice principal, Crystal Davis, was like, Mr. Lee, that program that you was telling us about during your interview, we need you to start it. And so then birthed Man Cave. And so it started out with Mr. Turnage and myself in 2016. And we just started building the culture. And then when Mr. Miller came in, so now currently is Mr. Turnage, Mr. Miller, and myself. And we come and we talk as Black men. And one of the things I love about the program is that we all share, right? And so shout out to Turnage and Miller, because they have particular skill sets that I don't have. And so whatever answer that I can't provide, they can provide. So Jen asked me another question. Do you have any tips about stage fright or performing? Yeah, I got a couple, or a few. A couple is two. I have a few more than two. First thing somebody told me was, when you're trying to memorize, his name is Steve Walters. He told me, like, when you're trying to memorize a poem, don't try to memorize the words, but try to focus on the feeling that you're trying to provoke. So whether it's sadness or anger or excitement, trying to portray those things and memorize those things, rather than just memorizing the words on the page, so that when you perform it, those feelings go straight through and they actually connect with the crowd, right? And with your audience. Another tip that somebody else gave me was, you're the only one that knows the poem, right? So if you mess up, keep going, because nobody knows that you skipped a line because they weren't there when you wrote it, right? And so sometimes when we get stuck and we show it, it's like that. Now, like, you showed it to the audience. But if you just pick up on the next stanza or on the next line, you can keep it going and keep it flowing. Oh snap, I just rhymed. Keep it going and keep it flowing. One thing, personally, the last tip I would say is enunciating your words and pronouncing your words clearly, so that the story that you're telling um, is being conveyed clearly, right? And so if
I'm talking too fast, and I'm never taking a breath, and all of my sentences are very, very long, and you can't really understand what I'm saying because I never take a second to
breathe and speak clearly and give you a chance to give you a bar and let it sit in the air for a second, right? And make you think about it, right? A lot of times with spoken word, there's a pace, there's a rhythm to it, and we want to stick to that rhythm, but we want to make sure that our words are still being heard clearly within that rhythm, right? We don't want the rhythm and the pace to override the story, because at the end of the day, the people came to hear the story. They came to hear the words. This is a life question. Kiara asks again, Key, why do we go through so much to get what we need? Um, that's a good question. Um, it's For me, it's been process, learning to respect the process and love the process and honor the process. Um, like my process of becoming a teacher had like my wife talk about it all the time. Like my student teaching, the year I was doing student teaching, and my last year of undergrad, like I was literally like losing my hair. I was stressed out so much, right? Um, but like it taught me things as I was going through different struggles. Um, I learned lessons along the way, right? I dealt with disappointment. Like one of the certification exams that I took, I failed by 1 point, one point, right? And that it kind of like still hurts to this day because I wasn't able to start teaching in September, and I had to start teaching later in like October or November. Um, but I was able still to, as I retook the necessary tests, it prepared me more to be in the classroom. Um, and those trials that we go through in order to get to success, um, it teaches us things, and it never feels good. It never feels good in the moment. People always say, like, you're going through something to help somebody else. It's like, bruh, I get all that, but I'm hurting right now, right? So when we're going through things, it doesn't feel great, but there's always, I'm a man of faith. So, the scripture in Romans, all things work together for the good. Um, I have to keep that in mind so that even though I might be struggling at this very moment, that something's going to work out. Well, these are things that has helped me through those hard times. When I had to quit my job to finish teaching and went from to finish my degree for teaching, going from being 20 something years old, making $1,000 every 2 weeks to making $100 working for the YMCA, right? I had to go through that process because it was taking me somewhere bigger, right? And so now that I'm going into my 5th year of teaching, all those lessons that I've learned, and even through that time, like God was able to show me like that my wife was the one, because the way she helped me out and held me down and paid for haircuts during that time that I was struggling, showed me that she wasn't there just because I was making a little bit of money at the hospital, but we shared some struggle meals in that. Long story short, during the process, you'll learn a lot of different things. And so though the process gets hard sometimes, don't forsake the process, because you will learn something if you keep going, and you will get to your goal, but you can't stop. You can't quit. What's easiest for you to write about? Um, love is easy for me to write about. I've been married going on 3 years. We dated for a year before that, and we were friends 2 years before we started dating. Um, and so my wife, it's easy for me to pick up my pen and write about my wife. My wife, hey baby, hi. She asked, um, what is one of your muses, if you have any? Um, so, if you didn't hear the last question, you are one of my muses. I love you. I love your smile. I love the way you support me. I love the way you love your family. I love how you grow, right? One of my muses that I'll choose to talk about here, like I'm a people watcher. Like I love learning about people, especially those that we claim to be celebrities and those who um, are established, right? And so um, I love like memoirs. And another one of my muses, and it kind of like goes the same. Like I love learning about like Black history and Black culture. Some of the books that I'm reading currently, well, these two books I'm reading, Walking with the Wind is John Lewis's memoir, who just passed, R.I.P. And then Ta-Nehisi Coates, um, we were 8 years in power. It talks about the 8 years that Obama was in office, right? Um, and in John Lewis's book, in the beginning, he talks about like being led by the spirit of history. Um, and I can attest to that. Like, I liked how it sounded, and preparing for this, I was like, yeah, that's kind of like a good point. Like, I love learning, although the Black story in America has been one of struggle, has been one of disappointment, has been one that makes me upset. Um, like I'm committed and I love learning about it, right? I'll be honest, I did not know John Lewis before he died. I did not know that he was on the front lines with MLK. I did not know all the great things that he did, but I am committed to learning it, right? This book, you see how thick this book is. Um, I want to learn his story. I want to learn the things that made him successful. Another book that helps me muse on like the history of Black people is $40 Million Slaves: The Rise and the Fall of the Black Athlete. I love watching sports, but reading this book taught me that like it taught me how when like integration happened with the MLB, it wasn't how the person who started the Negro Leagues really intended it. He actually wanted whole teams to be integrated into the MLB. But what happened was he died before that merger happened. And so what the MLB did is what big corporations do, and they just picked out the best players, Moses Fleetwood Walker and the Jackie Robinsons and the Roberto Clementes, right? And they just like plugged them in, and unfortunately, those who did not have the big name and didn't have the big numbers went to the wayside. And so, also shout out to the Negro Leagues. This year is celebrating 100 years. And so, yeah, like I love learning about Black people, Black culture. Um, uh, there's a beautiful documentary on the life of Toni Morrison on Hulu. If you're a fan of Toni Morrison, she's a beautiful writer. Um, Look it up. You'll learn some things. You'll learn some things not only about her life, but also about Black people, and the way she advocated for young Black authors, and the way she was able to put on the Audre Lordes of the world. So I love to people watch. I love to learn from people. Actually, I think we're done. That's all my questions. Again, thank you for watching the page. Thank you for taking this journey with me. Family Man Poetry at Family Man family_man on Instagram. Follow the page. I got some things coming. I'm excited, and I think I'm gonna get into this poem. I'm gonna share part of this poem with you. All right. So, as I told you, one of my favorite poems of mine uh, is called "Bruises and Scars," and I'm gonna read it from my phone because I haven't read it in a while, and I don't have it committed to memory. But let me know if you like it. If you hear a bar, type it in the comments. Show me some love. All right, it's called Bruises and Scars. The dictionary defines the word bruise as a verb: to develop or bear a discolored spot on the skin as a result of a blow or fall, etc. Definition number 2: to become slightly injured. For example, his feelings bruise easily. But it shouldn't matter whether or not I bruise easily, but rather did the person think about the consequences of the act before proceeding to follow through. If Shorty would have never ran, I would never second guess long distance relationships. We are complicated people. Signals get crossed when we live across the street from each other. Them drawings play twisted during long distance romance. You talking to yourself like, I'm not alone, but he not with me right now, so I'm alone and I don't like it. Like, did she just like his picture? Again? Scars are defined as a mark left by a wound, sore, or burn, a lasting after effect of trouble, especially a lasting psychological injury resulting from suffering or trauma. If you ask my heart, my head, arms, hands, and legs, scars are a constant reminder of the bruises that are not yet healed. Markings that only resurface when I'm ready to move on. They hold me back, make me second guess the best decisions that I never made. Bruises sometimes turn into scars, teaching you to not go too close to the fire because you might get burned. But the fire burns so bright that the flames spell out thoughts of maybe they won't take advantage of me this time. Maybe this time they'll see me like I see them. The troubling thing about scars is, like bruises, they don't always denote a healing. Sometimes they serve as cautionary tales. There are times that the scars are reminded of the 50 times you got up instead of staying down. We show them off like championship belts we won over bad decisions, stubbornness, and boredom. Those are the worst. Like when I was bored in gym class and decided to push the broken glass and then it was surprised until, like when I was bored in gym class, decided to push the broken glass, then was surprised when it fractured again. Why do we think the most fragile things can be pushed a little further? All we are left with is blood everywhere, and panic trying to find someone we trust to stop the flow. For the next 2 weeks, our thumb looks like a pot holder, and you have an embarrassing story to tell. 17 years later, you can still remember the frenzy of the initial pain. The voice of a bruise that has not yet been healed sounds like a leaf shaking in the wind, being tossed around by the smell of her perfume and the lack of daily contact, the yearning for closure that doesn't seem to want to come out of hiding. Open scars echo shady remarks that tell me that the wound is still fresh, even though we talked about it. But who am I to decide when the Band-Aid should be reapplied? Bruises and scars. One tells of a current pain. One speaks of a pain that has not been healed. I'm standing here trying to figure out what the difference is. Thank you.